Kristen, welcome to the podcast. It's great to chat with you again. For people who aren't familiar with you and all the amazing stuff you're doing, especially in the sports world, softball and all that way, would you mind filling them in a little bit about who you are and all the amazing stuff you've got going on?
My name's Kristyn Sandberg, and I was or I am a former Georgia softball player. I played there from 2008, graduated in 2012, went on to play 8 years of professional softball in the NPF, which was the National Pro Fast Pitch League. And after that, kind of did some college coaching, had a small little stint in there as a phys ed teacher, and right now kind of just running my own private training business where I see 20 to 25 kids a week, softball wise, just building player development, skill development, and I coach a hockey team on the side.
Oh my goodness, that's what a good mix. I mean, from softball to hockey and beyond that way. It sounds like such a fun life that way. And just kind of running it back from the start there. Obviously, you mentioned that you played collegiate softball, which is incredible. And you also played professional softball, which is something I don't find a whole lot of athletes that were able to play pro softball. And it's very difficult to track those athletes down to talk about those experiences on podcasts and that sort of thing. Personally, I've really grown to enjoy watching the game of softball, and we just did a podcast the other week with several softball strength and conditioning coaches about some of the unique considerations for the sport that way, from the pitch style to how often the pitchers throw and so on that way. And I personally overall just love the pace of the game. I feel like it's fast paced and anything can happen at any point or play, if you will, right? Like even just an infield like grounder could literally turn into a single just because of how quick the game occurs that way. So I've always enjoyed watching it that way. I'd love to hear more about what professional softball was like for you because like I said, it's very unique and we don't come across professional softball athletes that often that way. How did you get the opportunity and what did it look like to play pro softball, if you will?
So around that time, like I mentioned, the league, the National Pro Fast Pitch, they had a draft every year where there would be 4 or 5 rounds. I think at the time there was 4 or 5 teams. So you'd get 20 senior softball athletes across the country that would get drafted into this league that had a lot of actually former Olympians, Canadian, uh, USA, obviously. And so it was very competitive. You at any given time could be facing off against, Monica Abbott or the Cat Ostermans or the Jenny Finches that are so prominent in our sport as a hitter who, they're tough to face. You had some of the best defenders. So where you were saying, a routine ground ball in the infield, you think you're safe, but you're not because they're just so strong in what they do. They can get rid of the ball quick. They're accurate in their throws. You're right. The game is much faster. I think as coaches, we always say as you go from one level to the next, it's like the game speed up on you. And it takes some time to kind of reacclimate yourself, even high school to college, college to pro. The game is constantly getting faster. So uh when I started my rookie year, I did a lot of just DHing every so often. I play a little bit of first base. I was a catcher in college. Eventually, as I got comfortable more with our pitchers, got behind the plate a little bit more. It was super fun, traveled, did a lot of really cool things, met a lot of really great people that I still keep in touch with, played some really competitive softball, and, I just had a blast with it.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely incredible, and I'd love to hear more about what it was like being catcher in softball too, because I've noticed just watching on the TV, that ball moves in all kinds of crazy ways. They go up, they go down, they go left, they go right, and, I feel like to a certain extent, from my very limited experience playing baseball, and I wanna emphasize limited, there was a predictable element to it. Like, for the most part, they broke in certain directions, but in softball, it seems like it can literally go all over the place. And, with the proximity of the mound to the plate, like you have, again, just such little time to react to what's occurring in the moment, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely gotta be on the same page with your pitchers. You're calling pitches, you wanna make sure that you get it right. that they're throwing, what their best pitches at any given time. The hitters were some of the best hitters I've ever had to call pitches against. And, there's a couple of times you get crossed up. You think you're calling a changeup and you get a fastball, and it's definitely happened where I've taken one off the chest, or I think I'm getting a curve and I get a drop. So you kind of just call a timeout. You go out, you have a conversation, you make sure that you're still on the same page, and you go back to it. You try to limit those mistakes as much as possible, and yeah, the pitches do go every direction. Usually, um, the pitchers are side to side, and they are better either up or down. Sometimes there are a few pitchers out there that are really good at making it break horizontally and vertically, and so then you're really just trying to, as a hitter, um, have really good vision and tracking the ball, watching the pitcher's release, and trying to figure out, is this a pitch I'm going to swing at right now? Because they had some really tough movement as you progressed from college to the pro level.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear you bring that up on the hitter side as well. I didn't even think about that. Several years ago, when we did a podcast with Tony Abatini, he brought up the concept of tunneling, which was the first time I had heard of it. And we talked about it in relation to baseball, but I'd imagine in softball, it's significantly more difficult because, again, there's just a lot less space between the plate and the mound. So you've got to react so much quicker to, a ball that can look the same for the first half of the distance. And then the next half of the distance, take a dive down or cut in or cut out or what have you that way. I'd imagine it was quite difficult. How do you go about kind of breaking down the differences between pitches, and how were you able to find so much success for yourself as a hitter that way when you were playing?
I think being a catcher is really helpful in that department because the spin on the ball, and when you see that spin, generally which way it's going to go. Obviously, there's times where the pitcher doesn't throw it perfectly, it falls out of their hand, or they let go of it too early and too late, so the ball goes a little bit different. But generally, the direction it's going in. The other part is just going into the batter's box and having a game plan and knowing what a pitcher's best pitch is, what their out pitch is, what's working for them that day. Takes a lot of communication with your teammates. What are you guys seeing? How are they pitching you? Are they pitching lefties versus righties? So, it was a game of chess sometimes, because at the pro level, we were seeing each other so often with the limited amount of teams that it was like, okay, you knew this pitcher threw a curve, a drop, and a rise. And, the ones that go up and down are two of their best pitches. So you're like, okay, I got to look for a ball that's going to be like right here between my mid thigh and my belt, because I know if it's there, it's not going too far up or too far down at that point. So, you really just try to track the ball as deep as you can before you make your decision. And, um, you know, the other part of that too is you mentioned tunneling, but also this idea of like effective velocity. So the pitchers would also, throw one pitch in a location, a fastball inside. They take that same fastball and they just locate it low and away, even though it's speed, it feels slower. Um, and so you're really just working on trying to have a good approach and good timing with the pitch to give it your best swing.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and to your point, I didn't even think about the velocity components of it as well. I'd imagine that would throw you off real easily that way, and I'd imagine a lot of the things that you took from your own career that way and obviously just outlined become the kind of things that you kinda teach to the next softball generation, if you would, right? How to pick up on those small differences and how to make up for the timing differences when the one pitch to the next is a 20-mile-an-hour difference, if you will, because obviously your ability to pick up on those things and react properly can obviously make a big difference for your team if you're up to bat in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I try to share as much as I've learned in my career and what I continue to learn with the athletes that I'm seeing. A lot of the times, we are working on mechanical things to make sure that their swing is efficient and puts them in the best position to be consistent. We try to develop their mechanics in a way that they can be consistent and repeat them over and over and over again. And the other part that I really try to hammer into them is just a mindset. You know, you've got to be confident. You've got to be aggressive when you get into the batter's box as a hitter. And if you're going in there, second guessing yourself or not confident in what you're doing, then you're going to have a really hard time. I tell them, we can work on your mechanics all you want. I can create the most perfect, efficient swing for you, but if you're not going into the batter's box with an aggressive mindset and wanting to hit the ball, wanting to attack the ball out front, you're gonna get beat, you're gonna get jammed, you're gonna swing and miss, you're gonna swing at pitches out of the zone because in your mind, you're thinking instead of attacking. So, I think right now, some of the hitters I'm working with, there is kind of this mindset of, I think, afraid to fail. And so you try to just give them all confidence to, hey, this is a game of failure. And I know that's probably sounds cliche, but it really is. And you're going to fail more times than you are going to succeed. And with that, you just got to keep thinking, next pitch, next at bat, next game, right? Obviously, we want to try to correct some of those things as soon as possible. We want to be making adjustments game after game. If we can make them pitch to pitch, that's ideal. So I try to teach them how to feel what's happening, use their outcome of their swing to help them. So, for example, like if they hit a ball and it goes off to right field and it's tailing away from them, usually that's a sign of like, hey, we pulled off the ball or we didn't, um, get good direction or extension to the pitch. So on our next swing, we really want to focus on that. We want to, the spin of the ball off the bat will give you a lot of information. How it feels off your bat will give you a lot of information. And so if you can kind of just take those things in and be aware of what's happening and know what adjustments to make, you'll be able to do that much faster than having to, come next week to your lesson and be like, so this happened and this happened and I don't really know what's happening, but these are my outcomes. So I just give them all information that they can, and that way they can kind of self help themselves while they're going, through their games, their competitions, their tournaments, whatever have you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think of it as like the difference between giving someone a fish and teaching them how to fish at the end of the day. And it seems like your philosophy involves a lot of teaching and a lot of development of independent skills that way to understand kind of where they went wrong or what could be different the next time, if you will. And it makes me think back to I've read this in a book many years ago. Again, I was not that big in the baseball space, played for a bit, but no one as significant as like some of these other guys that I've worked with that way. But I think it was Carlos Delgado in this book had talked about how after every at bat he had, it didn't matter if it was just practice, if it was, in a game situation, he went back, went to the dugout, and this was, before the days of the iPhone 17 and before the days of the latest iPad, he would literally break out a pen and paper and write down a ton of different notes about the at bat he just had, right? Something to look back on, something to reflect upon. And I think there's something to be said about that level of attention to detail in order to succeed in a sport like softball that way, especially as a hitter, because as we've discussed, it's difficult, right? I think one of the other unique areas that coaches, especially those that have played the game at the level that someone like you has, can really have a dramatic impact on athletes is that transition period. And you brought it up earlier when you were talking about, the jump from high school to college, the jump from college to professional. Like it's a significant jump that way. How did you navigate those leaps to the next level, if you will, when you were playing? And how do you kind of turn around and help the athletes that you work with now to help make those leaps and jumps from one level to the next in sport?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of an element of confidence and feeling like you belong there. I wouldn't have gotten the opportunities I did at Georgia if I wasn't proving myself as a high school athlete playing travel softball. There was obviously something they saw in me, that they believed in me, that they offered me, a scholarship and a spot on the team. When I got there, I just tried to lean heavily on my teammates that had already been through it for a year, 2 years, 3 years. talking to them, what their experiences have been, really trying to talk with our coaches and understand what they were wanting from us. We did, a lot of fill pregame, practice, scouting pictures, reviewing our own swings, going through at bats from games. So there was a lot of learning that went on even, through 4 years. If I think about the hitter and the catcher that I was my freshman year to what I kinda transformed into my senior year, like, I was 2 different people, I felt like, just with how I was performing and even a confidence level. Like, I felt so much better, I felt like I was in control of things, um, and our coaches did a really good job of giving us the tool that we needed. They also did a really good job of knowing what buttons to push and when to kind of get the best out of you. And then, you make a jump from college to pro. I, was lucky to be surrounded by a good portion of players from our US Olympic team. And I, became friends with them fairly quickly. I guess sometimes I'm a little more introverted. So it takes and I, you know, they were helping me. I was, talking to them about what to expect. What do these pitchers throw? Again, like doing that whole scouting thing because I don't know some of these pitchers. I've never. They're 5, 6, 7 years older than you, and you've never seen them throw. So you got to lean on your teammates, your coaches. I was really fortunate, to have great coaches my rookie season, and honestly through my whole career that were intelligent. They knew the game well. They all had different experiences. So, the game can be played so many ways. So just listening and hearing out what everybody had to say kind of gives you a new perspective or a different perspective on how you view and see the game. Um, I actually I was pretty comfortable with my rookie season. I definitely had that sophomore slump. So my transition from college to the pro was a little bit easier. It was that first off season that, okay, I have to train myself. Like I'm not going to the weight room twice a week with my teammates and I don't practice 5 times a week for 6, 7 months out of the year. So that was a big adjustment. That took some time to, I think, figure out what that looked like in the off seasons. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the same. It's continuing to have your confidence and believe that you're there. Like I don't get drafted to play in the league if the GMs and the coaches don't believe I belong there. So trying to kind of have a little bit of chip on my shoulder and say, you're meant to be here. You're capable of doing this. Um, just go out there and have fun and compete, and whatever happens, happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's great insight and great advice. And it's so interesting to me that you bring up what you called that sophomore slump, if you will, because this comes up all the time when I'm talking with baseball and softball athletes alike is, they all give it a different term. Some call it the yips, whatever it is that way. But there's something that happens in these sports that I don't notice with other sports as often that way. And maybe they just have different language and I haven't picked up on it yet, but there's something about this concept of like, hey, 1 minute life is good, you're hitting good, pitching good, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, like, it almost seems like out of nowhere sometimes, simple things just no longer are as simple as they were that way, whether that's hitting, whether that's fielding and making a couple errors, or, from a pitching standpoint, missing your locations, whatever it is that way. That's something that I hear impacting almost everyone that plays either baseball or softball that way. And it sounds like you had a little bit of an element to that. And obviously you mentioned, growth and confidence and leaning on your teammates and so on that way. But is there anything else that you found that really kind of helped you through that sophomore slump period, to use your terms, if you will? Because again, I find a lot of athletes can relate to that and they're always looking for the escape from that situation, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is mentally you've got to understand like you're gonna go on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. You're never gonna be perfect. You're never gonna be 3 for 3 every game. You're not always gonna come through in those clutch situations, but it's kind of you gotta take this mentality of like, all right, I'm gonna be ready for my next opportunity there. and I want to be prepared. So, not dwelling on the past, not dwelling on yourself and your performance. I think, one of the things that my college coach would say to us all the time is like, get off yourself and get on the team. And I've kind of held on to that because what that kind of means is like, if you're sitting there dwelling about your failures or you're only focused on your successes, you know, there's other things that are going on around you. There's 8 other people in the field. So if you're struggling, well, look at the success that the team is having. Hey, we're still winning games. We're still putting up runs. You're still making defensive plays, and the other stuff will come for you eventually. Keep working. A lot of the times in sport, we think that there's this like hard work pays off type deal, and I believe it's true. I just think sometimes people think it's going to happen faster than they want it to. Like, oh, I went and took 200 swings last night, so tomorrow I'm going to go 3 for 3. Like, no, it doesn't always happen. But what you can do when you go do that is you try to think about the things that have been helpful to you that have led to success. Maybe it's a drill that you've done over and over again that if you just go back to your roots and you go sit on a tee and you do that drill over and over again and you kind of build yourself back up from the ground, then you find that success again. So it's a little bit of for me, like use the people around you, keep leaning on them, keep trying to help them, pick them up, maintain a positive attitude. Hey, if you feel like you're struggling, but your name's still getting put in the lineup, like you're still getting written down on the lineup card, somebody's got faith in you. Uh, so to me, it's like, okay, if somebody feels like I'm still good enough to be one of the 9 hitters in this game, I've got to have some confidence in myself that I'm going to go out there and perform. Otherwise, what's the point of me being in that lineup? So there's a little bit of pulling that confidence from others too. I think we have this thought process sometimes. It's like, well, if you don't believe in yourself, who else is going to believe in you? But on the flip side, I'm the coach. I'm writing your name in the lineup. I believe in you. You need to believe in yourself too. And sometimes we just got to get out of our own way, simplify things, stay out of your head as much as you can, and just keep competing. That's the name of the game for me.
Right, absolutely, absolutely, and you, use that phrase about kinda rebuilding yourself as you were talking as well, and I think that there's an element of that that's always true into situations like we were just discussing, but there's also an element of that that really holds true for the athlete who's facing injury, right? Hey, one day I'm running all good, I'm throwing the ball all good, next minute, all of a sudden doc comes knocking and they're like, "Hey, you can't do that for 6 weeks, or you can't do that for 8 weeks," or whatever it is that way. And that locus of control was literally just shifted totally away from the athlete all the way up to waiting on, a timeline or something like that from a medical provider, if you will, because of injury that way. And it's interesting because I've talked with some baseball and softball athletes who have told me, hey, I talked to my coach and, playing this sport, it's not a matter of if I get hurt, it's when. It's, hey, when is my elbow going to finally give? When is my shoulder going to kind of give? Which that's a whole separate conversation because I think I have different opinions than what some of these people in the space are saying. But, have you ever had to face an injury like that yourself in your career that way? And if so, what was that kind of process like for you going from, again, not being able to do the simple sport things that you were able to do all the way up to now I've got to kind of rebuild that from scratch, if you will.
Yeah, I have certainly faced my fair share of injuries, from broken bones, pretty serious stress fractures, torn meniscus, recently just had, torn UCL, torn flexor tendon. So I had the lovely Tommy John that no baseball, softball player really wants to have. But yeah, I mean, I've had, 8 different surgeries now at this point over the course of playing and then post playing. College, I had a couple, that I had to deal with that took me out for, I actually got injured in the World Series my sophomore year and didn't actually get cleared to play until January of my junior year.
Oh my goodness.
So that was a little. that one was a little bit tough. So I had had a stress fracture of my lateral femoral condyle that, uh, when I finally got back to school, because I had gone home after the World Series, and they had told me, "Hey, it's just a bone bruise. Kind of take it easy for a little bit. As you start to feel good again, you can kind of work your way into, hey, get back to training. You can go back and play summer ball. This is something where you just kind of got to give it some time to calm down, and then you'll be all right." And what actually happened, I think, over the course of the summer was that bone bruise turned into that stress fracture. And when I got back to school, I kept saying, like, "Hey, I literally feel like I'm being stabbed in the back of the knee with a knife right now." And, we finally got some new imaging, and I remember being in the weight room, and our athletic trainer walked in and was like, "Hey, you need to sit down right now." And I was like, okay." Like, I don't know what this means, but and he kind of explained the severity of it. And, I met with the doc the next day, and, you walk in there one day and you sit down, and then next thing you know, you're crutching out and you're like non-weight bearing for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it was. And I'm like, "Wait a second, I just played all summer. Like, I've been training with the team for the, last week and a half that we've been back at school. What do you mean?" So that one was tough in that it was kind of this period of, like, it's really just about listening to my body and expressing what I'm feeling to the trainers and the medical staff, um, because we really needed that intense pain to calm down to kinda get back to weight-bearing activities. So, I meet with the doc and, "How are you feeling?" "Ah, I still kind of feel this." "Okay, take the crutches for another 2 weeks. Go back." "Oh, how's it feeling?" It's alright, but as I we did this, rehab-wise and did that, it kind of flared it up. Alright, take the crutches for another 2 weeks." And I'm like, What do you mean?" Like, this started out with, "Hey, we're just doing this for 6 weeks." Next thing I know, we're into November, and I'm still, maybe down to 1 crutch at that point. I don't remember, but I felt like a really, really long process for something that wasn't like a major, like, it wasn't like a ACL reconstruction. It, for me at the time, it felt like it was very, minor, but it actually was not.
Yeah, no, it's so interesting to hear you bring that up because I've had a number of athletes that have unfortunately struggled with bony type injuries like that, stress reaction, stress fracture, you name it. And it's been very frustrating to them. And a lot of them have kind of looked at me and said, like, I wish it was something that they could have just done surgery on and then it's better because some of them, they didn't get better. There was a couple that we had that went through bone stimulators and all these
Yep.
crazy different things for 1 to 2 years, and there's no change, and it still hurts, and they're just kinda told to live with it, and it's like, "Wait a second, there's, like, a crack in this bone, and now I'm just being told to live with it and accept it, and that's as good as it's gonna get?" It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I found for a lot of athletes, those bony injuries, kinda like you mentioned, they're more frustrating to deal with for them than a lot of these other injuries where it's like, hey, yes, this isn't easy, but I know if I get this surgery that, everything is kind of fixed. It just needs to heal. I need to do the rehab and then we're good to go. As opposed to like, I don't know the exact number, but like I said, we've seen multiple anyways that just bony injury that never healed like it should have, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I had a running joke with our athletic trainer at the time because, every time I went to go see the team doc, he'd be like, "If it was torn, I could fix it, but, unfortunately, I think we would just need to give it time," you know? So, I like you mentioned, like, I had a bone stimulator that every day I'd put it around my knee 2, 3 times a day and just kinda sit there with it, um, and yeah, it was just like a waiting game to see when this pain would kind of subside, and eventually it did. But, I was still had the giant unloading brace that, I had to wear underneath my uniform, and I don't know, it wasn't terrible, but it definitely was like bulky and limited my range of motion when I was down in a squat as a catcher. So I had to get a little creative and change up my stance a little bit while I was wearing it. But, eventually you you continue to listen to your body, you do all the right things, you find yourself back out there on the field eventually. And for me, it was longer than I would have liked, But, at the end of the day, I was healthy for opening weekend, and we eased back into the lineup as a DH. I played a little bit of first base, and, the biggest message from my coach at the time was, "Hey, I don't need you catching right now. I need you catching in April and May and June, hopefully at a World Series again." So, I didn't love it. Catching is kind of what drives me to softball. It's, the one thing that I love doing, which I guess if we go back to kind of like the performance thing too that you mentioned earlier, like when I wasn't hitting, I knew I was still catching. So I could use that as like my little getaway from my hitting performance, which also would kind of help with that. But yeah, I mean that process was long, it was lengthy, it was kind of a roller coaster up and down, and a lot of trips with our athletic trainer to see the doc and game planning, but, we got it eventually, and that's all that matters, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, no, eventually we got there, that's good, and it sounds like you had a very supportive AT, which I think also makes things so much easier as well. Not to say it's easy by any means, but essentially, like, I've seen some of these athletes that it's like, "Oh my gosh, this is the first time they've ever been injured," and it's like trying to navigate that while also still navigating the stresses of college and all these other crazy things that they have going on. It can be a lot if you don't have a good support system in place. So it's great that by the sounds you had that. Now, obviously, you also mentioned about the elbow that way and the Tommy John, if you will, that way. I'd love to hear more about that because that's another one that obviously comes up a lot in this baseball, softball kind of world, if you will. But I feel like every time I've seen on social media, you seem to be really crushing that rehab so far.
Yeah, so this one was interesting. Last summer, I had an ulnar nerve release from some pain that I was having in my elbow, that kind of randomly just appeared. I can't really pinpoint it to one particular thing that might have done it, but, at the time I was coaching college softball and I know I was throwing a lot of BP and I just kind of had this elbow pain that I figured, okay, it's probably just some tendonitis. You've been throwing hundreds of, BP pitches a day. It's late in the season. It'll calm down over the summer when, um, you're not coaching to this degree. And so it did. But then we got back and I started working with my athletes over and over again, day to day, and it kind of came back. So the difference is that summer it didn't go away. So I figured, okay, let's go get this looked at. Got the initial MRI results. My UCL was actually great at the time. And they started asking me these questions about like tingling in my fingers. And I was like, I mean, I also have Raynaud's, so I can't really tell you for sure if this tingling is like nerve or circulation or, so it was like, okay, well, if we do this injection and it alleviates your pain, then we know it's coming from the nerve compression versus a bone, like a bone bruise or anything like that, or even just the Raynaud's, right? So got the injection and kind of cleared my elbow pain. I was like, wow, this feels great. Like I feel like I'm 18 again, this is like gone. So with that, we were like, okay, let's I can't do it now because we're getting ready to start, a college season. So can we do this in, May, June, whatever? So that's what we ended up doing. And so I had that last June, was rehabbing from that. Um, and as I was rehabbing through that, I was starting to feel like some snapping while I was lifting. So I'd go overhead and do like some sort of press and come down and I would feel something snap and my ring and my pinky finger would tingle. And I'm like, that's not normal. I've never had that before. And yeah, I'd go back to the doctor. She's like, oh, I don't feel it snapping. It feels like it's in the groove. It feels like it's okay. And I'm like, all right, but like, I'm telling you, I'm still in pain and this is what I'm feeling. So ironically, where most people feel the pop while they're throwing, I actually was at hockey practice one night and I went to go shoot on my goalie and the puck went about 2 inches in front of me. And I felt my forearm kind of ripple and I was like, that's not right." Being a thrower, knowing what the injury kind of entails, I I was like, you know what? Let me grab another puck and let me just shoot it. And so I did, and I was able to shoot it. So I was like, okay. Now, ironically, one of our other coaches is a physical therapist. So I was like, Katie, we might have an issue here. When we go back in the locker room, will you look at something for me? And in the moment, she was like, I mean, you feel loose, but you feel loose as you've been throwing your whole life. So that it she's like, "I feel 2 endpoints." I'm like, "Okay, great." But the pain kinda kept going, kept going. So eventually, I went back to the doc. She ordered me a new MRI, and it came back, and I had a partially torn flexor tendon, a partially torn UCL. I had kind of a stress reaction going on in my elbow. Wasn't quite to the point of fracture yet, but from my understanding, it was a pretty significant thing going on in there. Um so, initially she kind of wanted to do just like a debridement, clean it up. And I was like, well, what about the tears? So I ended up seeing one of the elbow specialists here, and then eventually just kind of went and got a second opinion from Dr. Ahmad because he's right here in my backyard. He's like, listen, I don't even need an image to tell you that the snapping you're feeling, like, you need to move your ulnar nerve. And I was like, okay. He's like, if I would have seen you last summer for what you were telling me was going on, he's like, I would have just moved it. It's like, all right, sounds good. And then he's like, while we're in there, we can fix this flexor tendon, and that'll add a little bit of time to your recovery. I'm like, okay. And he goes, and then we can fix the ligament. I can stitch it. I put an internal brace in there. He's like, but that's going to add significant time. And I'm like, I understand that. I don't want to do this again. I've had 7 other surgeries. Okay. I'm not going to have you just go in and move the nerve and then wait for a full rupture. Like,
Right.
let's just hit it all and like let's be done with it. So that's kind of that timeline. And so yeah, I'm about 4 months into that. So, strength-wise, feel really good. Tried to throw the other day, didn't go so hot. We'll try. We'll try again soon.
Yeah, one day at a time, and I mean, I think it's such an interesting kind of, situation you found yourself in, and that's another thing I hear from a lot of athletes as well is, like, the days of get one opinion from a doctor and go all in on that seem to be fading to the past, and a lot of times, athletes need a second opinion or sometimes even more depending on what their injury is, and I think that that's something that I always advocate for, especially if it makes the athlete more comfortable, more confident in kind of what the plan and path forward is. Because to your point, going through 7 orthopedic procedures and or 7 orthopedic injuries, I should say, that's not something you want to continue to add to long term. So to your point, if you can just get it all done on one shot, that's probably what I would do. I've had other athletes that have had that with like ACL injuries and different things where it's like, well, you tore 70 to 75% of the ligament and, we could, see if we can patch you up and get through the season, or we could just do it now. And it's like, just do it now, start the process, and then get back sooner. Obviously, as you were talking, you also brought up, the hockey component, which I, for some reason, just completely left in the back of my memory. I'd love to hear how hockey has fit into this whole journey as well, because obviously we've talked extensively about softball, but it sounds like you've had multiple sporting interests during that time as well.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I played anything that I could, get into. My dad was a hockey player himself. When I was younger, he was kind of playing in local rec leagues, and I don't know, I just really liked it, the physical part of it, that it was fast, and so I started playing that around 8. I played baseball, softball, 5. I did the whole T-ball little league all the way up. So the 2 main sports I played growing up were softball and ice hockey. Um, Continued to play both really through high school. And, once I got to college, I was like, okay, well, clearly you can't do this. Also, you're in the South. Where are you going to find a hockey rink? Not really possible to do that. So I picked it back up again when I moved back home, and I got back into playing into adult leagues myself. Met a whole bunch of people around here that I didn't know. Reconnected with a lot of people I did know growing up. So I get to play with some of the girls that I played with growing up now again, which has been really fun. And in the process, met the hockey director at the local rink who ran a girls organization, and I'm now 6 years into coaching that too.
That's awesome. My goodness, it's amazing to hear how you've kind of taken all of the sports that you played as a kid kind of full circle, and now you're coaching them and kind of giving back to that next generation, if you will. And I think there's something to be said about that because a lot of athletes tell me, "Hey, I never want to leave the sport." And it's like, well, you don't have to. You can find a way to make that sport
Yeah.
your life and career moving forward. You just might have to get a little creative, if you will.
Yeah. It's been interesting. The group that I have now at with the hockey team, I've had a lot of them since they were 12U players. So I've coached them for the last 3 or 4 years. So that's been really fun to see their growth and their development over the last couple of years. You know, I always loved hockey. I would probably say it was my first love. I was probably better at softball around that time where it was like, okay, let's make a decision. There's also way more opportunity with softball to play collegiately at the time. So that was kind of the route we took. And then, yeah, there's kind of like this running joke. All roads lead to beer league, if you will, whether it's, softball goes to the slow pitch side, hockey's got rec leagues, there's soccer leagues, there's flag foot. I mean, you name it, like whatever you want to play, it's out there. You just got to find it. And so, yeah, I got back into it. It's been a load of fun. I enjoy going out there with my friends and getting a workout in. And then, just working with the kids and giving them a space where they feel like they can grow and mature, become confident in not just like their game, but themselves. And it's one of those things that's like really rewarding as you're doing it. I think coaching is a really rewarding profession, no matter what you're doing it in, whether it's in sport, in a rehab setting, I would even say sometimes teaching, you could call coaching, right? It's just in a classroom setting. So, giving the kids tools and confidence that they need to succeed in life is, you know, like you said, giving back is just really fun to do.
Absolutely, yeah, it's one of those things I find the cup never empties when you're too busy spending all of that energy to uplift others and pour into others that way. There's something powerful about that process of just giving into others and, again, giving back to the sport that gives so much to you, and obviously, you mentioned hockey might have even been the first love before softball. Softball was obviously number 2, and I feel like if I had to guess, number 3 is probably the Georgia Bulldogs. Do we
Yeah.
have any do we have any predictions for, this weekend's, upcoming game against Ole Miss here?
Georgia by a million.
And I'm assuming that, if the season ends, we're only gonna have 1 loss in the column there, at the end of the season, in a perfect world.
Perfect world. Yep. One loss. That's it. All the way to the natty again.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing, and, of course, it was a close one too. It's like, anytime you lose by a field goal, it's like, it coulda gone either way, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to wonder why you didn't kick the field goal with, 8 minutes left in the game and just tie it up right then and there. But I get it. You're confident in your line that you could probably get a yard out of it, and it just didn't happen.
No, it happens like that sometimes, and it's one of those things I always say, "Just full send it." So, if I was in the moment, I would have definitely full sent it as well, because
Yeah.
I mean, why not? Life is too short to not full send it. So, Kristen, this has been awesome. I really appreciate your time sharing so many different insights about your journey in sports and injuries and so on that way. Is there anything we missed as we were chatting today or anything else you wanted to share with people listening?
Um, I don't think we missed anything.
Yeah. No, for sure. For people listening and they wanna keep up to date with all the amazing stuff you're doing online and maybe even reach out, obviously, you mentioned that you do a lot of coaching in the, softball and hockey space that way. Where can they find you at online, like, Instagram, TikTok, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I've got my personal Instagram page, which is ksandberg23, and then where I share a lot of all my training insights, tips, different drills, is under All Pro PD, which is just short for All Pro Player Development, which is on TikTok and Instagram. Um, that's where I put all my little tidbits to try to share and grow and just pass along. Uh, Try to get the best information out there. I think that's one of the things with the internet is it's really good to find information. It's also really good to find poor information. So try to do my best of sharing, my knowledge uh, to help and grow the game, grow the players, and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. We'll link to all of that in the description below as well. That way, if you didn't quite catch it, you can just click there, see everything that Kristyn is up to. This was amazing. Thank you again for your time and insights, Kristyn.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.